Welcome to the Scotty C and Rye Show. I'm Rye Masuda, and joining us today on a part one of the NCAA Men's Basketball Championship preview, we have a very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself, special guest?
I would be special guest Ashley Masuda.
We have my wife joining us for our part one. Scotty C will be here tomorrow, which is Wednesday, to record part two, give us his thoughts and his bracket. We're breaking this up because Scott is a bit of a degenerate, and our schedules no longer match up, despite the fact that Scott now lives in the same area that I do. So despite Scott moving to Florida, our schedules actually matched up better when he lived in San Francisco.
Fancy that.
Yeah, I know. What are the odds? So what we're going to do is, because Scott is unavailable to record until Wednesday night, I wanted to get something out there to kind of break down my bracket, your bracket, because you are very active in doing this as well. This is not your first rodeo at this, and you've actually had some success against me in our head-to-head matchups. I believe I won last year, but you won the two previous years before that. So
get that on record.
Yeah, it's on record. It's official. So before we kind of get into this year, why don't you tell us what you look for when you're looking at your bracket? Because I think it's a little bit different than some of the conventional ones, but it's a little bit more than, you don't just look at mascots.
No, I don't look just at mascots, but I don't necessarily go by, I don't know, their season stats, I guess.
So you're not an average college basketball fan, is what you're saying?
Definitely not. I mean, I'll listen to your ramblings here and there.
I apologize.
No, I do listen. I really do listen, and I try to retain that information, but there's so much of it that sometimes it flies out.
But I think that's part of what makes the NCAA tournament so unique, is that you have a person like me who is a big college basketball fan, really, once January rolls around, starts really diving into the regular season, the advanced metrics, the postseason tournaments. But then you have someone like you who just, as you mentioned, is kind of a casual observer. I have the TV on college basketball every Saturday once the calendar turns the new year, and you've beaten me 2 out of the last 3 years. So it's really a huge crapshoot.
Or a special skill.
Or it could be a special skill.
Hashtag winning.
I just need to get on your level. But okay, so this year, obviously, Kentucky's the overwhelming favorite. A lot of the discussion out there right now is, do you take Kentucky or do you take the field? And I was kind of surprised, because a lot of the reports I saw showed about a 50-50 split, and I was actually expecting Kentucky to have more of a stranglehold, I guess, on that question, mostly due to the fact that Kentucky's really played one close game all year, and that was to LSU. I'm sure you remember that game in this household.
Very well.
So Kentucky, they're 34-0 going into the tournament. That question's posed, you take Kentucky or take the field. And I think let's just get right off to it. You do not have Kentucky winning the national title.
No. And I'm just going to stick with one of our brackets, just because we do a couple of brackets. But in all of them, I do not take Kentucky.
Yeah, so we do one bracket each. We do one on Yahoo, one on CBS, and then one on ESPN. Yeah. And that's kind of how we do the tiebreaker in this household, is we do 3.
Yes.
But essentially, my bracket is very similar aside from a few games. I'm just going to give you the one that I'm most comfortable with. I think you're going to do the same. So you don't have Kentucky winning in any of your 3 brackets.
No. And I guess I kind of see the 50-50 thing with Kentucky, because, I mean, yeah, they were undefeated all season, but can they go undefeated throughout the championship? Because, I mean, during the championship, crazy things happen, and teams that aren't ranked very well beat teams that are ranked very well. I remember a few years ago, I think it was Butler.
Yes, before Butler became Butler, you actually had them in the Final Four.
I did.
Yeah, you were ahead of the Brad Stevens Butler train long before it actually happened, and I believe they were an 11 seed that year.
I can't remember the exact ranking, but they definitely weren't a favored team by any shot, but they ended up going pretty far.
No, they made it to the championship game against Duke that year.
Yeah.
And you actually had them. Did you have them in the championship game or the Final Four?
I think just the Final Four.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
But still, you were ahead of the Butler train long before it had left the station. And that Duke Butler championship game, one of the best championship games in recent memory. I mean, that game, Gordon Hayward shoots that three from half court that hits the back iron and bounces out. I mean, that goes in. Butler wins the national title. Butler went back to the championship game the year after that, lost to UConn in one of the worst championship games. But no, that's a good point by you. Is you were on Butler early on. So back to your bracket. No Kentucky.
No, I mean, I have them in the Final Four, but I don't have them in the championship game.
All right, so why don't you give me your Final Four, and we'll work backwards from there.
All right. My Final Four, I have Kentucky playing Arizona and Virginia playing Gonzaga.
All right, so you have Kentucky, Arizona, Virginia, and Gonzaga. So you have 3 2 seeds and a 1 seed.
Correct.
And I think it's only been one time where all 4 number 1 seeds have made the Final Four, and that was a couple of years ago. Generally, you have anywhere between 2 and 3 1 seeds making the Final Four. Obviously, you will always have 1. So you are electing to go with just 1. Is there any reason that is it kind of the strength of the 2s? What led you to put 3 number 2s in there?
Good question. It's kind of just throughout my process of elimination when filling out my bracket, it just ended up ending up this way. I kind of, when I'm going through the bracket, I try to, I don't know, I guess like not pick apart necessarily, but look at the 2 teams that are playing and the likelihood of which team, coming out the victor, and how far do I think that they might go, and whether or not I like that team personally.
So what sort of research did you do? Because we also pick college games against the spread, and you are actually pretty darn good at that. So what sort of research did you do on these teams when you're researching your bracket?
Well, to be honest, with this bracket, with the basketball, I definitely didn't do as much research as I did with football. I'll be honest. This was just kind of my own general guesses, if you will.
But you've done it for a few years, and so you obviously have a few teams that you trust a bit more at this point in the tournament, and a few teams that you maybe don't trust as much because of what they've done.
Yeah, pretty much. And I kind of rack my brain for things that you've said in the past regarding teams. And
well, now you're just trying to flatter me.
So. Well, certain coaches too, coaching skills. LSU. So I try to take that into consideration when I'm picking each game. And that's kind of how I filled out this bracket. With the football, I definitely did a lot more research. I would kind of go back throughout the week and read up on how each team did and what players were injured and what the probability was that each team would win the next game and so on and so forth.
Okay.
That's how I'd fill out those brackets. But that was a week-by-week thing. This is kind of a...
Yeah. You're cramming for the SAT a few days before. All right, well, my Final Four also it's a bit different. It only involves one number 1 seed. My Final Four is Kentucky, Arizona, Gonzaga, and Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, the 5 seed out of the East region. And one of the things that has shown to hold true in this very random, supposedly random tournament where it is extremely difficult to win 6 straight games is you have to have a top 20 offense and a top 20 defense. And Northern Illinois is one of, I believe, 2 or 3 teams in the country that is in the top 20 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, according to Ken Palm. This Northern Illinois team out of the Missouri Valley, very, very, I think it's obviously a top-heavy conference with Wichita State and Northern Illinois, but this is a very, very good basketball team. They got a lot of seniors, and this is a coach that beat Kansas a couple of years ago in the NCAA tournament. In my opinion, the East region is probably the weakest when you look at it top to bottom. Oh, I take that back. The Midwest region for Kentucky. I mean, Kansas is the 2 seed, Notre Dame's the 3 seed. I think Kentucky has the weakest region. But after that, I think the East is very much up for grabs at this point. I mean, Virginia, one of the best defenses in the country. Can they score? You know, Justin Anderson's been out with a broken hand. He came back, didn't really play much, and hasn't really looked like himself since he's been back. Can he play into form? It's possible, but it's kind of hard to do that when you're potentially staring at Michigan State in the second round. So I'll just start out East, where obviously I have Villanova playing LSU. I think LSU and NC State are 2 very, very similar teams. NC State often goes through scoring droughts. NC State likes to try to force turnovers and get baskets off of that style of play. I mean, LSU and NC State are very similar teams. And anytime LSU has played a team that is very similar to them, for the most part, LSU has won. I mean, LSU is 6-1 against teams in the field this year. Their only loss was to Kentucky. And NC State, Mark Godfrey, there's a lot of familiarity there with Coach Johnny Jones. They both were on the same staff at Alabama for a year. And I just think LSU has too much talent to lose to NC State. Louisville, I think Louisville will beat UC Irvine. That's a popular pick. A lot of people are talking about that 13-4 upset. I just don't see it. UC Irvine, they're good, but Louisville, I just think, has too much talent to drop a game in the first round to UC Irvine from the Big West. Providence against Boise and Dayton. I like Providence a lot. Oklahoma, Albany, again, I don't think that's close. I think Oklahoma is able to take that. Michigan State, Georgia gave me a bit of a pause because everyone's jumping on Michigan State. No one really is giving Georgia a fair shake in that game. Could be Georgia coming into the tournament quasi cold. They didn't really finish very strong. I think it's a very tough matchup for Georgia and Coach Fox, especially because Tom Izzo has some time to prepare. If Michigan State was playing Georgia maybe perhaps in the second round, I might give the edge to Georgia. Because Michigan State, yes, they played in the Big Ten tournament final, but Michigan State is one of the worst foul shooting teams in the country. And they go through moments where they can't score. I mean, in the Big Ten final against Wisconsin, they didn't score in overtime. Like, they just can completely shut down. This is a team that's very similar to Kansas. Great coach, a good but not great team. But because Tom Izzo does have time to prepare, I do think that Michigan State, it might be closer than a lot of people think, but I think Michigan State will find a way to win. Obviously, Virginia over Belmont. I actually have Virginia then beating Michigan State, and I have Virginia beating Providence to advance to the Sweet 16. My first number 1 seed that I have losing would be Villanova to the University of Northern Illinois. And then I have Northern Illinois and Virginia in the Elite Eight, with Northern Illinois moving on, because I just think Northern Illinois they're just deep. I mean, they're a deep team. They got size. They can shoot the ball. And like I said, one of the very few teams in the top 20 of offensive and defensive efficiency. So I think Northern Illinois as a 5 seed. We've seen the Missouri Valley, with Wichita State these past couple of years be very, very dangerous. And I think Northern Illinois really does have the team to do it and the depth to hang with some of these bigger schools. So is there anything you would like to add from the East in terms of who you have and kind of any sort of?
I pretty much have a very similar setup as you for the East. I have Northern Illinois going as far as the regional finals as well, but Virginia beating them out.
Okay, so we have the same Elite Eight matchup between Northern Illinois and Virginia. You just have Virginia beating them.
Correct.
So you also have Northern Illinois beating Villanova.
Mm-hmm.
And just a quick touch on this for the LSU fans. When the matchups initially came out, I was very excited that LSU was in Villanova's region because of all the number 1 seeds. I do feel like Villanova and Wisconsin are the 2 weakest 1 seeds. But the more I looked into Villanova, the more they terrify me.
Really?
They have 4 guards who can just shoot. They got 4 really good 3-point shooters, all shooting over 36%. And their guards are experienced. I mean, this is a team that last year they lost to Connecticut. Connecticut went on to win the national title, so I don't think you can really fault them for losing to Connecticut in the second round. And Jay Wright, a lot of people are talking about Villanova's propensity to lose early in the tournament, but Jay Wright's he's been to a Final Four. He's a very good coach. I mean, Villanova, he's able to accomplish there year in and year out. He's a great coach. And LSU can beat Villanova. It's absolutely possible, but they're like Hornsby, Quarterman, Patterson, and Gray are going to need to defend for all 40 minutes against 4 guards that can rain threes. And LSU just doesn't have depth. So if any of those 4 guys gets in foul trouble, that's when it becomes very, very iffy, because Jordan Mickey, as we've seen, has been limited by the shoulder injury. And I'm just concerned that Villanova, with the amount of shooters, and Villanova is another team that is in the top 20 offensively and defensively in efficiency. And so when you have a team that can defend if their shots aren't going, but they are also capable of just raining threes upon you, which in the NCAA tournament, as you know, if you get hot in a game, like, you can go home. You can send the team home real quick. So while LSU has all the talent capable of beating Villanova, it's hard for me to see a team as inconsistent as LSU, not only defending their shooters for 40 straight minutes, but also Johnny Jones winning the coaching matchup against Jay Wright. So let's go to the South region, where, I mean, the interesting thing is we both only have one number 1 seed. So where do you have Duke losing in the South region, where Duke is the number 1 seed?
In the Elite Eight, I have them losing against Gonzaga.
Do you want to know where I have them losing?
Where?
I have them losing the Sweet 16 to Utah.
Really?
Utah is another team that is just outside the top 20 in offensive efficiency, but is a pretty underrated defensive team. Utah, another team that didn't finish strong, but even though the Pac-12 was slightly down this year, Utah finished second in the regular season to Arizona. They went and beat some really good teams this year. They got size. They can shoot. Duke, I don't know what to make of Duke, because Duke is a team that also, like Villanova, like Kansas, they've lost some real head scratchers in the tournament. I mean, they have one of the 2 best players in all of college basketball, in Jahlil Okafor, and they've been on fire since they dismissed Suleiman. But the thing with Duke is they can't defend. They're not a good defensive team. So it's hard for me to see them navigating against a very balanced group. Both, I don't know. It's a lot of people want to give it to Krzyzewski, and that's very understandable. But it's just hard for me to see them navigating the stretch when, I mean, the ACC this year was good. It was a good, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, it seemed like college basketball for the most part this year, you had like Kentucky, and then everyone else was like a good step below.
Yeah.
And if you're a step below, it's hard for me to think you can win, 5 games to get you to the Final Four. And Utah, despite stumbling a bit at the end, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. And if you can hit your threes and you can rebound and you can defend, that translates. So, I mean, we both have Duke not making the Final Four. So is the
correct.
What do you?
Just so I'm looking at my bracket and I have Utah losing.
Oh, well, that's what makes it. Utah could very well lose to Duke. They could very well lose to Stephen F. Austin. I mean, Stephen F. Austin, this is a team
that's who I have them losing to.
Yeah, Stephen F. Austin, they won a game last year. The only thing for me when I was looking at it, it was Stephen F. Austin. They don't have a player that's bigger than 6'6". So Stephen F. Austin, if they hit their shots, they could very easily beat Utah. If they don't hit their shots, it could be a long night. But Stephen F. Austin, they've been there before. They're not afraid. What do you have going on with Iowa State? Because Iowa State's a team, we just saw them. A lot of people are prisoners of the moment, and they just came from behind to beat Kansas to win the Big 12 title game. This was a team that had a couple of comebacks in the Big 12 tournament. So Iowa State.
I have them going through to the Sweet 16. Playing against Gonzaga, but then Gonzaga beating them out. I have them going fairly far.
Sweet 16. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I thought it was interesting though that the Big 12, despite having what I would consider a down year, they got 3 seeds. I mean, they got Iowa State, they got Baylor. And then they got Oklahoma. And I just thought the Big 12 this year wasn't as good as everyone kind of made them out to be. I know, it was all you. You were pumping that Big 12. But, I mean, Iowa State, I just mentioned it. I mean, they had to come back 3 times in the Big 12 tournament. And I'm just wondering, yes, they have this in them, but, I mean, how long can they keep that up? And the Big 12 this year was definitely not as strong as I thought it would be. And for me, I actually have SMU beating Iowa State in the second round. SMU, a team last year, was the big, why didn't they make the tournament? And they went on to win the NIT, which I think does kind of translate into the next year. So SMU, even though Larry Brown is not a favorite coach of mine, I think SMU is extremely deep, and I think SMU is all more than capable of beating Iowa State. And so I actually have a couple of upsets going down in the South region. Although a 6 and a 5 seed in the Sweet 16 is nothing too crazy, but I do have Utah playing Duke, and then I have SMU playing Gonzaga. And then I do have Gonzaga moving on from the South region. Gonzaga, I think everyone's really talking about Gonzaga and how they always underachieve. And yes, Gonzaga's had some early exits, but when you look at the teams that they've lost to some pretty good teams in the tournament. When they lost in the second round a few years ago, it was to Wichita State, who ended up playing, Kentucky. So it was, not exactly losing to it's not like they were Georgetown and losing to a couple of double-digit seeds, which, by the way, Georgetown, another popular upset pick. A lot of people picking Eastern Washington. And Georgetown, another seed I couldn't figure out. Like, how did Georgetown get a 4 seed? But do you have Georgetown losing to Eastern Washington?
I do not.
You do not? No, neither do I. I actually have Georgetown in this one. I think there's too many people picking that one. So, all right, well, let's move over to the Western region where both of us have Arizona coming out. Why don't you run through and give us kind of a quick rundown of who you have in this region?
Let's see. Well, as you just said, I have Arizona basically going down to the Final Four, so they're beating out Texas Southern, and I don't have Ohio State advancing at all whatsoever. Arizona State, of course, beating VCU. Baylor, I have going
You
to
mean Ohio State beating VCU?
beating Ohio State, yeah. VCU.
Oh, you have Arizona beating VCU.
Yes.
Okay. Not Arizona State.
No.
Okay. Continue. You said Arizona State.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say Arizona State. This is where Ashley stumbles over her words because this is not my seat. I have Baylor advancing to the Sweet 16. I have a thing for Baylor Bears. I enjoy them.
I mean, they've done very well in the tournament.
That was my reasoning for picking them, to be honest. North Carolina, I have advancing to the Sweet 16. Let me just go through my Sweet 16.
Yeah, just go through the Sweet 16.
The 4 teams in the West that I have advancing to the Sweet 16 is Wisconsin playing North Carolina and Baylor playing Arizona in the West. And then advancing, I have Wisconsin playing Arizona and then Arizona beating to advance to the Final Four.
All right, so I don't think there's much disagreement here. I have Oregon beating Oklahoma State, Arkansas beating Wofford, North Carolina beating Harvard. I do like BYU. As of this moment, the BYU Ole Miss play-in game has not occurred yet. I do like BYU to win that game, and then I like BYU to beat Xavier. BYU, the team that beat Gonzaga.
Those are a couple of things that I was kind of hit or miss on, was the games that haven't happened yet. But I picked Xavier to beat whichever team wins.
Yeah, and then I have Wisconsin playing Arkansas in the Sweet 16. I think Arkansas is being a bit undervalued here. Wofford's actually a bit of a popular upset pick that I was surprised to hear. Wofford, they tend to play up or down to the tempo of their opponents, and Arkansas, if they force the game to be fast, I think Wofford's in a lot of trouble. I think Arkansas could really run away with that game. And I think the SEC as a whole is being a bit undervalued just because of the dominance of Kentucky. But at the end of the day, I do think Arkansas will have enough to beat North Carolina. North Carolina, another team that they've come on a little bit of as of late, but I'm just not a big Roy Williams fan. And Arkansas's press, I think, can force enough turnovers from North Carolina where they can get into it. Wisconsin, I think, is way too disciplined and way too smart to fall for Arkansas's scheme and game plan. So I think Wisconsin will beat Arkansas rather handedly. I think they'll frustrate the Razorbacks. And then, again, I have Wisconsin and Arizona. Arizona, one of the hottest teams in the country right now. The 3 teams they lost to are not in the NCAA tournament, but they've also got some really good wins. And they are, for a team that can't shoot, they're scoring over 84 points a game right now in the last 2 weeks. So Arizona really hitting their stride at the right time. The Midwest region, we touched on it a bit. Why don't you kind of give me your rundown? I'll give you mine really quick. I got Kentucky, Cincinnati, Buffalo beating West Virginia. The reason I took Buffalo, West Virginia, Buffalo coached by former Duke legend Bobby Hurley. West Virginia, one of LSU's biggest wins of the season in Morgantown, but Bob Huggins, he's never really been a favored coach of mine. And when you take a look at what Vegas is saying, West Virginia is only a 4-point favorite. 4-point favorite for a 5-12 game. That had me going with Buffalo. Maryland and Valparaiso, I think this game's going to be very, very close until about 4 minutes left in the game, and I think Maryland will pull away. But I expect Valpo to be in this game all the way. Butler and Texas. Texas was one of the surprises for teams getting into the NCAA tournament. They had a very down year. I mean, they basically lost to every good team they played. They feasted on the bottom of the Big 12. I just think they're going to be Butler.
Well,
Texas has some pros. They have some pros on that team. And at the end of the day, I just think talent in this situation, because the way I looked at this one was it came down between Texas and Indiana for me, because when we were watching Selection Sunday, when Texas and Indiana announced, I kind of looked at you and I was like, oh, well, this is kind of bad news for LSU, because these are two bubble teams that are in. And if these two are in, that means LSU might be kind of treading on that outline.
Mm-hmm.
And it always happens where there's always a team where everyone's like, why did they get in? Why did they get in? And then they end up winning a game or two. It always happens. And so for me, it was between Texas and Indiana. Texas just has way more talent than Indiana, and I think has a better matchup than Indiana. Indiana against Wichita State, I don't think is a very good matchup for them.
No.
Indiana cannot defend. They are one of the worst defensive teams in the country. Like, their defensive efficiency rating is like in the triple digits. So that's not good. Defense travels, and when you're that poor defensively, I just don't think Tom Crean's going to have it for Indiana. So that's why I just think Texas with some of their NBA talent is, despite Rick Barnes as coach, they're going to get it done. And yeah, so Wichita State against Kansas in a game that Bill Self's probably not too happy to see on the schedule. And then I got Wichita State beating them, playing Notre Dame. And I got Wichita State over Notre Dame. I think a lot of people are really buying into that Notre Dame stock right now. And, keep in mind, this is an Irish team, another terrible defensive team. Yeah, they can score. They're one of the best offensive teams in the country. But what happens if those shots aren't going down? Wichita State's been there. Notre Dame, not so much. And I would not be shocked if Texas beat Notre Dame. It wouldn't shock me at all. But I did not have the chest to pick Texas to beat Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame, Wichita State would be a really, really excellent matchup, which would set up a rematch between Kentucky and Wichita State in the Elite Eight, with Kentucky winning that one again to move on to the Final Four. So your championship game is Arizona and Virginia. Who do you have winning?
I have Arizona beating out Virginia in the championship game.
Do you have a score for us?
Right now I do not.
Well, just give us one. She tried to look off my paper.
Well, even though you have completely different.
I have a completely different final.
We'll go with, how about 72-68 Arizona.
Ooh, a good one. A good one. My final four: Kentucky, Northern Illinois, Arizona, and Gonzaga. Championship game, Kentucky, University of Northern Illinois. Man, giving the Missouri Valley some love. I have Kentucky winning very comfortably, 91-68. I think Kentucky goes 40-0. I don't know. If you're giving me the field or if you're giving me Kentucky, I'm taking Kentucky.
I mean, it's not impossible. But I'm saying it's just not going to happen.
No, if there's a team that can get them and they're hot, hey, Arizona.
In my research, Arizona was one of the top 5 teams that could knock Kentucky back. Just saying.
Well, we will see. And thank you very much for doing this part 1 with us. I thought you did a great job filling in for Scotty C.
I did all right. I can't compare to the real Scotty C.
Well, I don't think any of us can compare to the Scotty C show.
I do have to say, I think it's a little unfair, because when I like to make my picks, I like to listen to the picks that Scotty C has chosen and then determine whatever team that he says will win, I will go with the opposite. So
shots fired.
This may not be fair. Sorry, Scotty C.
Well, Scotty C admitted to us the other night when we were at Sweetwater that he's been a bit behind. So it might serve you well to tune in Thursday morning, because that's the thing. Scotty C is going to record his part 2 Wednesday night, which means it'll probably go up early Thursday morning. The brackets lock on Thursday, so if you can, give it a listen. If you want to pick against Scotty C, that's entirely your prerogative. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but
Good advice.
So as always, you can find us on h3cruising.wordpress.com. I'm on Twitter at Rye_guy. Scotty C is at the Scotty C Show. And we will be back with part 2. So thank you, Ashley, for joining us. I think you did a phenomenal job. And,
Thank
you know, best of luck to you.
Best of luck to you. May the better one win. Me.